guys, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if you're new. That's not right. Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing part 2 of comparing the Wet n Wild palettes to their dupes by Colourpop. Now, I talked all about this in my last video, so I'm not going to go into too much depth because you've already heard the whole spiel, but pretty much Wet n Wild just released 3 palettes that looked identical to ones that Colourpop had already previously released. And in my last video, I went over the Honey palette and found out that it was a very good dupe for the Honey palette by Colourpop. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about the Cherry palette. Now, there is one more. It's the Coconut palette, but I'm not a huge fan of neutrals, so I think I'm just going to skip making a video on that one. I mean, unless you guys really want to see it, but for now, I don't really have an interest in doing that. Now, something that I didn't pick up in the last video was that these palettes all have scents to them. Like, because this one was like, I was studying this palette and I'm like, what does that smell? It smells kind of like a chemical cherry, like cherry cough syrup or something like that. And I realized it was this palette. And then I went and I smelled the coconut one and it smelled like cocoa. Oh no. Damn my long nail. Damn it. I just dug my fingernail into my palette. Anyways. Oh my god, and I'm putting this one upside down. I am a mess. So, and then the Cocoa palette smells like cocoa. And then the Honey palette smells like something that's not honey, but I guess it could be honey. I don't know. So anyways, these palettes are extremely cheap. They're only $4.99 in comparison to the Colourpop ones that are $14. So it's about a third of the price. Pretty good deal. Can't really go wrong. Now, I'm looking at these palettes, and while they are very similar, that shade is beautiful. I'm so mad I dug my nail into it. You see that? Anyway, I mean, it's not like I'm going to go through that entire pan anyways, but still. Now, these palettes are very similar to each other, but I wouldn't say they're like shade for shade dupe. You know? I mean, they do have the general vibe of like that pink and purple cherry tone to it, but I don't think they're like spot on dupes. Now, something I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised by. So when you think of a cherry palette, you would probably think of lots and lots of red shades. But, well, I guess this one kind of has a red shade right up here. But these didn't really have any red shades in either of them. And I have to be honest, I actually kind of like that. Because I'm kind of over red at this point. I have enough red in my collection, and I can only wear it sporadically because it doesn't look the greatest on me. Anyways, so I was kind of pleasantly surprised to see that these palettes represented cherry in a different way, like that kind of black cherry look with like the purples and the pinks. So yeah, so I thought that would be fun. So let's do an eye look. I'm not really expecting them to be completely identical because they are quite different in some ways. Like, they have the general concept, but I don't think it's like an exact copy, if you read me. By the way, if you're curious as to what's on my lip, it is the Just a Tint lip duo from the Colourpop Animal Crossing collection. Animal Crossing collection. Now, this is my first time trying Just a Tint from Colourpop, and I was not a fan of the smell, but like, look how creamy and shiny that looks. And by the way, before any of you could be like, oh my god girl, tone it down with the blush, this is my natural skin tone, and for some reason I look crazy red today. I don't know what's going on, so let's just ignore that. And yeah, I could put foundation on, but do I want to? Not really. Okay, like, body confidence here is what we're all about on this channel. Alright, so I'm going to wear a palette on each eye, and the first thing I'm going to do is go in with Cherry Stem from Colourpop, and that's just kind of like, I don't know, a brownish red shade. Not like a brick red, but it's just, I don't know, it's like a muted brown red. We're going to put that in the crease. By the way, I don't know how much sense this look is going to make, because it was kind of hard to find exact dupes for the colors. Like, the more I looked at the palette, the more I was like, oh, they're kind of different from each other. So this look might just be like really odd, but I just want to try out the similar shades. I just want to try out similar shades to see if we can recreate the same look. Okay, this is my first time trying the Cherry palette by Colourpop as well. And that just went on really nicely. So yeah, as you can see, it's kind of like a red brown sort of shade. I swear, I'll talk fine all day, and then I get on camera and I'm like, tongue-tying all my words. Okay, so now the closest shade I could find to resemble that in the Wet n Wild palette is this one in the corner, and it's more of like a purple red than like a brown red. So it's probably going to be quite different. Whoa. Holy powdery though. Holy powdery. So yeah, this shade definitely pulls more purpley red, whereas this one pulls more purpley brown. And TBH, I kind of like the one from Wet n Wild better. Okay, yeah, that is extremely different. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do then is go in with Black Cherry and put it on this lid, because maybe that tone will match it a little bit more. Or it will be like Bright Fire Engine Red. You know, that too. Let's see. Okay, yes, this one layered over that other Colourpop shade looks a little bit more in line with that one. But you gotta layer to get this effect. Otherwise, it's probably gonna be very, very bright red. By the way, these two palettes came out around roughly the same time as each other. So I'd be pretty hard pressed to believe that Wet n Wild straight up ripped off this palette from Colourpop. I mean, they definitely for sure had enough time to rip off the Cocoa palette and the Honey palette. I mean, the Honey palette was pretty exact. So I think that any similarities between these two palettes is just a coincidence, or they had a leak from Colourpop. So there you have it. So yeah, so there you have it. Fairly similar. Oh my god. So there you have it. Fairly similar, but also fairly different at the same time. I think I'm going to do the same thing I did in my last video and put a shimmer shade in the outer corner just because I need to. I don't have anything else. So I'm going to take this sparkly red pink shade called Juicy Juicy. Oh my gosh. Okay, say what you will about Colourpop in their annoyingly fast launch rate, but they got some pretty palettes. And this blends out really nicely. I mean, not too much difference in the tone between the colors, but you know, it's enough to do the job. The closest shade that I could find in the Wet n Wild palette was this one, and it does look like it's a pink red shimmer, but it's more like brown pink red shimmer. So let's use that one. It's more like a rusty bronzy pink. Ooh, okay, so something I do notice, so I'm not wearing primer on any of my lids, and I'm noticing while the Colourpop one is holding pretty good, the Wet n Wild one has already started to fade. Right there. Come on, you can do it. Ooh, okay, so yeah, it's definitely a little bit more dark. It's like a burgundy sort of bronzy shimmer. I don't know the word I'm looking for, so if you know what I'm trying to say, then help me out. Okay, lots of fallout on the Wet n Wild one. Overall, a really pretty color. But still pretty different from the Colourpop one. Honestly, this look is pulling a lot more red than I thought. I thought it would be more like pinky purple. Okay, so we do have some fallout going on. Colourpop does blend nicer, gotta say. Now this is the only shade that was like an exact dupe. And it's this coral shade right here. So the bottom one is Wet n Wild. So you can see the difference. The Colourpop one is a little bit more of a watermelon coral, and the bottom one is more like a muted coral. I'm doing great with my descriptions today. I think that's a really pretty unique shade. I haven't really seen a shade quite like that. Not a lot of difference in the tones between the palette. Now I'm going to go in with this middle shade from the Wet n Wild palette on the other lid. It does take a little bit more effort to get it out of your brush for the Wet n Wild. But honestly, once you get it out of the lid, I think they're pretty similar. Like, there's just not a lot of contrast between the shades. And it could be because of the shades I'm choosing, but I just went with the ones that were most similar. Yeah, look how nicely that Colourpop one blends out. And then we go to Wet n Wild, and it's not as easy. It's not like extremely difficult, but it's just not as easy. Now I'm going to go in with something a little bit different and take this really dark black cherry sort of shade. Nice purple shade, and just do this. I'm like really gonna smoke it out this time. I realize I don't smoke out my lids as much as I want to, and now I know why, because I look like a zombie. Alright, and this shade is definitely more of a brown with kind of like a purple undertone. But again, it's the most similar, so it's what we're going for. Oh, honestly, on the lid, they're not all that different. Or not on the lid. On the lower lash line, they're not all that different. I mean, it's still pretty brown, but it's not that different. Okay, maybe it is all that different. Now that I'm looking at it. Alright, and then the final thing I'm going to do is take a color that's completely unrelated and just go for it. I want to put Sweet Like, which is this shimmery pink shade that I dug my finger into. And I just want to put it in the center, just to add like a little bit of sparkle, or I don't know, something to the look. Damn, you could literally use any shade in this palette and get the same exact look. That's my mini review on this palette. It's like all the colors are the same. And in the Wet n Wild palette, I'm gonna take this one, which couldn't even count as a dupe, but I don't know, it was calling to me, you know? I will say, the thing that maybe I like a little bit more about the Wet n Wild palette is the colors do provide a little bit of dimension to the look, because they're not like all the same color. So that's where Wet n Wild might win out. This is a really pretty shimmer shade. Okay. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that eyeshadow. I work it out. That didn't make sense. Okay. By the way, I take it back when I said these two shades were kind of similar, because they are glaringly different and it's really distracting. Alright, so there you have the final look. Now I gotta say, I think these palettes are similar enough to each other where if you had one, you don't really need the other one. but I definitely would not call these palettes dupes for each other because they're just a little bit too different in some ways. When it comes to which one I think you should get, I think it all comes down to preference. Now I will say the Colourpop one definitely blended a little bit easier. It didn't fade like the Wet n Wild one did. There was definitely less fallout. So I think the Colourpop one definitely had those three things going for it. And as far as pigmentation goes, I think they were both pretty equal in pigmentation. Like, I didn't find either one to be overly patchy or lacking in pigmentation. Like, maybe the Wet n Wild one was slightly more effort to build up, but nothing like that would deter me from using it. Now, the pros that I like about the Wet n Wild one is it's cheaper, so that's always nice. And I think you get more, like, I think you get more variety in the colors that you're given. So your look can be a little bit more unique. Like, you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I see that. When you're looking at the eye, you definitely see the breakdowns of different colors as opposed to it all just looking like one giant blob color. But I will say, as far as the color story goes, I think that the Wet n Wild one is a little bit more grungy cherry, whereas this one is a little bit more true cherry. But I don't know. I like them both. So I'm glad I have both. But I don't think you need both. I really don't. And like I said, I just think it comes down to preference. So if you're a fan of cheaper, then get this one. You're not really going to be missing out if you don't get this one. But if you're a fan of having your eyeshadows blend nicely, you hate the fallout, you want it to last long. But again, this is without primer. So if I had primer, you know, the Wet n Wild one might last just as long as the Colourpop one. But if those things are deal breakers for you, then get the Colourpop one because you wouldn't be missing out with the Wet n Wild one either. So there you have it. There's a review. I like them both, recommend both. They're not dupes, but you would do well getting either or. So there it is. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you really want me to do the cocoa one, I will do it. But otherwise, just subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye.